Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. My name is Anna and I'm about to show you a few fails that have happened to me in my kitchen recently. Before we go into all of it, I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, none of these are like full fails, as in the food went down the toilet. We ate all three things. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking that the first one was like a quarter fail, like almost not a fail at all. Then with the meat, that was like halfway there. It definitely would have been better without the mistake. And then the last one was a near fail. Like half of that blueberry pie we actually did throw out. So that's just something to start you off. And then I wanted to talk about why am I doing a fails video. So first of all, it is to encourage you, to show that it is absolutely normal to fail, or rather make mistakes in the kitchen, especially with something like cooking, which I believe is a huge science. There is so much chemistry going on, so it's no wonder that even people that have lots of years of experience do make mistakes. And then the second reason, more important for me personally, is because out of those three things that I cooked, with one of them, I actually know exactly what happened and I know exactly how to fix it. I'll talk about that in the video. But with the other two, the baking projects, I'm actually not sure. And I would like to make them again, or at least one of them, and I would really like to know how to fix it, but I'm not sure how to go about it. So I'm hoping that you, my viewers, are going to have some opinions or some advice for me of what I can do differently next time. And so with that intro out of the way, let's get into the video. The first thing that I'm making, the quarter fail, if you will, are these buns with wild garlic and Parmesan cheese. Now, this really was just a small fail. I would definitely love to make these again, but I would like to figure out how to correct that one small mistake or imperfection, if you will. So first I am mixing up all of the ingredients. You will find the list of those ingredients down in the description of the video. The one thing that was not in the recipe that I kind of added on my own was a spoonful of my sourdough starter. I added that just to get those good bacteria from the starter into the dough, but I didn't like long ferment it or anything, so maybe it didn't really have that much of an effect on it, but maybe it did have an effect on my slight fail there. So I would definitely appreciate if you would let me know what you think about that. So I'm mixing everything up with my hands, all of the more dry ingredients with the butter, then adding some of the milk. And then you will see me add the wild garlic. So a little bit about that. Wild garlic, or in the Czech Republic we call it the bear's garlic, is an herb that you will find in the wilderness, in damp woods. But of course people also grow it in their gardens. It's supposedly, again, very easy to grow. I don't know, never grown it myself. But you can also, at least again here in the Czech Republic, you can buy it at the store when it's in season, which usually is around April, early May, depending on the weather, of course. Now the one that I'm using, I bought at the supermarket. That's the one that I'm showing you here. But I then also found it at my in-laws' garden. So that's what you see here. That's what it looks like in the wilderness. Wild garlic is supposed to have lots of health benefits. In like a traditional European medicine, you could say, it used to be used for better digestion, to cure any like breathing illnesses, or to prevent cardiovascular diseases. Now, I don't know how all this holds up in current medicine and in the current studies, but hey, I don't think it hurts to have it in there. But if it's not available to you, you can just easily swap this out with spinach, for example, which I think is pretty common everywhere. And I would be curious to know if you actually have wild garlic in your country. So I'm taking my garlic leaves, I'm chopping off the stems, and then chopping everything and mixing it into the dough that I've made earlier. When that's done, I will roll it up into a pretty thick rectangle. The goal is to have about 8 pieces, I think it is, or maybe 10 pieces. It really is just like a small snack, but of course I think you could easily increase the amount of ingredients that you're putting in, and then just roll it out into a bigger rectangle if you want to have more of this. I'm putting it onto parchment paper. I don't know if you know this trick, but to prevent the parchment paper from rolling onto itself, you just crumble it up into a ball and then you spread it out again and it lays pretty flat. So I then put on the mixture. I cut it up, but I'm not cutting completely through the dough, only just about 75% in, I would say. So I'm marking all the different pieces. I then make this egg mixture with an egg yolk and some milk and spread that all over the buns. And then as the last step, I add some more parmesan, actually lots more parmesan. And as I'm watching this, yeah, it just looks delicious again. I then bake it in the oven at 220 degrees for about 15 minutes until it's really nice and golden at the top, which it was here. However, and this is where my slight fail comes in, when I started cutting into it, it had a beautiful crunch at the top. However, the bottoms, like the bottom, I don't know, quarter of the buns just felt and tasted undone as well. And my dilemma, or I just don't know how to fix this. Should I bake it for longer at the same temperature, which feels like I'm just going to burn the tops, or should I just decrease the temperature and then bake it for longer, increase it, bake it for even shorter? Yeah, I just don't know. So let me know if you have an answer for me. The next thing I'm making is a blueberry pie. Now, the cookbook that I'm using is one that I don't use very often, and I was again reminded why. Because it uses the same dough for all of the recipes, and I just think that it's not a very good one. So I think the problem is here that there's just way too much butter, and you will see when you go into the ingredients, which again are linked in the description of the video, there is a lot of butter. I think the original recipe has about 200 grams. I only did 150, and I think that was still way too much. But so to what I'm doing here, I'm mixing the sugar and the eggs into like a fluffy, foamy mixture. Then adding the softened butter and the milk, mixing that again. And then I'm adding slowly the flour into it as well. And I think I should have just seen it. I mean, I should have known just from looking at the consistency of the dough that it's just way too runny to work. But I don't know, like I guess I just trust the cookbook, and I should have trusted my instincts instead. Anyways, I'm putting or taking out my cake or pie form. I really like this one. Again, I like all the different forms and pans and all of that. Anyways, and maybe this was again another issue because the recipe did ask for a form that would be a little bit bigger. So I'm guessing maybe if it was bigger, then the dough would be more spread out, and it would properly cook through. The problem, which, yeah, I didn't mention here, is that it just wasn't done in the middle, and it never got done, not really. So I'm pouring it in, and then I'm adding in those blueberries. And maybe, again, that was the part, because I've added a lot of them into the middle and fewer onto the outsides. So maybe it was more juicy or more runny in the middle because of that as well. Yeah, lots of factors, I feel like, that played into this one, and I would really love to know what you think. And for the baking part, it asked for an oven preheated to 180 degrees Celsius and to bake it for about 30 to 40 minutes. But you will see later that that did not work for me. I own it myself. But you can also, at least again here in the Czech Republic, you can buy it at the store when it's in season, which usually is around April, early May, depending on the weather, of course. It's supposed to have tons of health benefits as well, but if it is not available to you, by the way, let me know if it is. I would be curious to know how other countries are Once all the ingredients are combined, I am putting it on the stove and starting to boil it slowly. And I'm testing that cake to see if it's done. Again, making that mistake of putting my chopstick into the side of the cake instead of the middle, but clearly, I mean, not even the sides are done here. So I'm putting it back into the oven, I think for maybe like 20 additional minutes I did at this point, or something like that, trying to see the clock on the oven, maybe 10. But clearly, I mean, it's just nowhere near done. So I'm preparing my meat for the pork roast. It's a pretty big chunk, and that's why I actually really like this recipe, because you don't really do anything with the meat other than just wash it, dry it, and that's it. You salt it, you put it in your pot or your pan that then goes into the oven, and that's it. So it's super, super easy in that sense. The glaze is definitely boiling at this point, and the recipe says to reduce it to about a half. I just really wasn't able to tell if it was half or not, but I felt like it was done at this point, or it had a good consistency, so I turned it off and I let it cool down a little bit. Before the meat goes into the oven, I of course needed the pie to be done, but it just wasn't getting there. And I think maybe that was my wishful thinking. That's why I didn't put the chopstick into the middle, because I unconsciously knew that it would not be done in the middle. And so I only tested it on the side and it seemed clear there. So I took it out, and then I've put the meat in. Before that, I increased the temperature to 190, and I left the meat in for 20 minutes. Just like that, with only salt on it, nothing else. 20 minutes to brown. When that was done, I took it out and I poured almost all of the glaze all over it, but you do want to leave a little bit for the very end. And then the meat went back into the oven, now reduced down to 150, and it was baking for about 50 minutes. And throughout the baking process, I did this maybe like 3 times, where I took it out and I poured the glaze all over it again. Now, as a side dish for this meal, I just made some very simple potato mash. And we are getting to a point where I've made my half fail, as I would call it, on this one. So I took the meat out, that was all good. Then the next step was to pour the rest of that glaze into the pan where the meat was baking, and then on very high heat, reduce it down while kind of scrubbing the bottom to get all those nice juices from the meat incorporated. And maybe you can already guess what happened, but when you heat up on very high heat, something that's very sugary, it is going to start to caramelize. And I definitely overdid it with the time that I was caramelizing this for, reducing it for, because it reduced way down. I was in the middle. You saw me add a little bit of wine, which can also be replaced by water. And there's just a very easy fix to this one. Just don't reduce it for as long or as much. And you can see when I'm pouring it over the meat, I mean, it's so funny. Like it's more, a little bit more of a liquidy caramel at this point. But I mean, it was still really nice. And I know that there was such an easy fix to this. Or when it started being too reduced, I could have easily just added more water to, again, make it more liquidy. But oh well, I guess I just wanted to have lunch done and that was it. But so that one was just kind of funny. But of course, we still ate it. But it would have been really nice if it was more liquidy, because then the juice would just sink more into the meat. But anyways, and here we are with that freaking pie again that I've cut into once lunch was done. I've cut into it and I've realized that the middle is like as if the pie was not baking at all. It's just completely runny, completely undone. And I was so disappointed at this point. So it went back into the oven for, I don't know how long, maybe 20 minutes. And at that point, still not done. But of course, the outside was already burned. Like all those blueberries that were on the top, all the sides of the cake, like it was a mess. So I've decided to just taste test it. I mean, it was okay, like it was edible, right? But it was not what I was imagining when I was making it. So that's the end of today's video. I know it's not a very positive one, but again, I would very much appreciate your advice on the 2 baking projects. And I will see you next time with something that is properly done.